The crowd froze. A sharp gasp cut through the air as Officer Kane shoved 15-year-old Maya to the ground in the middle of Main Street. It was broad daylight. Shoppers, workers, and even children eating ice cream stood in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. Maya's small body hit the pavement hard. She winced, her palms scraping against the rough asphalt. Her backpack slid off her shoulders, spilling books and pencils across the street. But that wasn't what shocked people the most. It was the way the officer kept his knee pressed into her back, yelling, "Stop resisting!" when she wasn't moving at all. Her cries for help echoed across the block, rising above the honking of cars that had stopped at the intersection. And then, the most chilling part, her mother, Evelyn, came running from the corner store, her voice breaking into a scream that no one present would ever forget. "Get off my daughter!" People pulled out their phones. Some yelled at the officer to stop. Others just stood there, afraid, unsure if stepping in would make things worse. The city had seen bad things before, but this was too much. A child. Broad daylight. Everyone watching. Evelyn's hand shook as she dropped the bag of groceries she had been carrying. Apples rolled onto the street, bouncing against tires, but she didn't care. Her eyes were locked on Maya, and for a split second she froze. She knew this was the moment that would change everything. But no one, not the officer, not the crowd, not even Evelyn herself, could have predicted what she would do next. Just 2 hours earlier, it had been an ordinary afternoon. The sun shone brightly over the small town of Briarwood. It wasn't the kind of place people expected to see chaos. The streets were lined with flower shops, bookstores, and family-owned diners. Everyone knew everyone, or at least recognized their faces. Maya had been walking home from school with her mother, chatting about an upcoming science fair project. She loved science, loved asking questions. Evelyn always told her that curiosity was her superpower. But Evelyn also warned her to be careful in this town, a place where curiosity could sometimes be mistaken for trouble, depending on the color of your skin. They stopped by Mr. Lawson's corner store to grab milk and bread. Evelyn smiled warmly at the older man, who always slipped Maya a piece of candy when her mother wasn't looking. Moments like this gave Evelyn hope that not everyone in Briarwood saw them as outsiders. But as they stepped back onto Main Street, everything shifted. A police cruiser slowed to a stop near them. Officer Kane. Everyone in town knew his name. He had a reputation, strict, short-tempered, and always watching. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten the moment she saw him. She grabbed Maya's hand, whispering softly, "Just keep walking." But Kane wasn't about to let them walk. "Hey, you." His voice boomed, sharp and accusing. Maya froze. "Me?" she asked, pointing to herself in confusion. "Yeah, you. Come here," he barked. Evelyn tried to step in front of her daughter. "What's the problem, officer?" "Quiet," Kane snapped. "We've had reports of shoplifting. She matches the description." The words hit Evelyn like a punch. Maya, her daughter, who had never stolen a thing in her life. Evelyn's mind raced. She wanted to argue, to shield her child, but before she could say a word, Kane grabbed Maya by the arm. That's when the yelling started. That's when people stopped walking and turned to look. That's when everything spiraled into the moment that would soon make headlines across the country. Maya's cries rang out. Evelyn's heart pounded so loudly it felt like it might burst. She stepped forward, determined to free her daughter. But just as she reached out, Kane's hand moved toward something clipped to his belt. The crowd gasped. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. And then, Evelyn's breath turned sharp and shallow as her eyes locked on the officer's hand. It hovered near his holster, the shiny black handle of his weapon catching a glint of sunlight. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men clenched their fists but stayed rooted to the spot, fear holding them back. Maya's voice cracked. "Mom." Time seemed to slow. Evelyn's world shrank to two things. Her daughter's tear-streaked face pressed against the pavement, and the man towering over her, his hand twitching with dangerous intent. "Don't you dare!" Evelyn spat, her voice trembling but fierce. She stepped closer, closing the space between herself and the officer. "She's a child. Get your hands off her." Kane sneered, his grip tightening on Maya's arm. "Back off, lady." You don't tell me how to do my job. The tension in the air was unbearable. Every second felt like a string being pulled tighter, ready to snap. Evelyn's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She could feel her body shaking, but she refused to step back. Not this time. Not when her daughter was the one pinned to the ground. Please, Maya whimpered, her voice thin and broken. That sound was all Evelyn needed. Something inside her erupted. She lunged forward, grabbing Kane's arm with a force she didn't even know she had. The crowd gasped louder now. Phones raised higher, recording every detail. And then, Kane shoved her back, his eyes blazing. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Hours earlier, before any of this chaos unfolded, Evelyn had been sitting at her kitchen table with Maya. The smell of warm pancakes filled the small home, sunlight spilling through the blinds. It was one of those mornings that felt safe, ordinary, even peaceful. Maya was talking excitedly about her science project. Mom, I'm building a model of the solar system. Mr. Lawson said I could borrow some of his cardboard boxes. Her eyes sparkled with hope. Evelyn smiled. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. You'll show everyone just how smart you are. She reached over, brushing a crumb from Maya's cheek. Don't let anyone ever make you feel small, okay? Maya nodded, giggling. Never. Those mornings were Evelyn's treasure. They were what gave her strength to face the whispers, the stares, the little slights that came with living in Briarwood. She'd always told herself she could endure it, so long as Maya had a chance at something better. But now, that peaceful morning seemed like a memory from another world. Back on Main Street, the chaos was spiraling. Evelyn's hands shook as she steadied herself. The crowd was no longer silent. Leave her alone, a woman shouted from across the street. Yeah, she's just a kid, another voice echoed. But Kane wasn't listening. His jaw was tight, his movements jerky, as though fueled by something deeper than duty. He yanked Maya up by her arm, her feet barely catching the ground, and shoved her toward the cruiser. Evelyn's heart stopped. He wasn't just detaining her. He was trying to take her. No, Evelyn cried, her scream raw and desperate. She darted forward, grabbing Maya's other arm. The tug-of-war began, mother against officer, child caught in the middle. For a terrifying moment, Evelyn thought she might lose. Kane's grip was iron, his voice booming like thunder. She's coming with me. But Evelyn didn't let go. Her nails dug into her daughter's sleeve, her arms shaking with the effort. Not today. Not my baby. The crowd surged closer, the lines between bystanders and witnesses blurring. Some people shouted, others sobbed. A few begged the officer to stop. And just when it seemed the struggle couldn't get any worse, Kane reached again for his belt. His fingers brushed the handle of his gun. Gasps. Screams. A child cried in the distance. Evelyn's entire body went cold. She only had seconds to decide, fight, plead, or something else entirely. Her pulse thundered in her ears as her lips parted, ready to unleash words that would turn the entire town upside down. And then, the officer's hand lingered on the weapon at his side. The sunlight caught on the metal, sending a flash that seemed to blind Evelyn for a second. Her heart slammed against her ribs, panic crawling up her throat. She knew that one wrong move, one word spoken too loudly, could turn the moment into a nightmare no mother should ever face. But then something inside her shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it transformed. It became fire. It became strength. Evelyn lifted her chin, her eyes burning into Kane's. "You pull that gun on my daughter," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "And the whole world will see what kind of man you are." Phones flashed. Dozens of eyes watched. The crowd, which had been a nervous sea of whispers, erupted into shouts. "Let her go. Don't touch that gun. We're watching you." Kane froze. His chest rose and fell heavily, sweat shining on his forehead. He wasn't used to being challenged. Not like this. His fingers twitched against the weapon, but he hesitated. Maya's small hand clutched at her mother's sleeve, her nails digging in as if to anchor herself to safety. "Mom, please," she whispered, trembling. Evelyn wrapped an arm around her daughter, pulling her close. "I've got you, baby. she whispered back, her words both a promise and a shield. For a tense moment, no one moved. The sound of the wind brushing against the flags outside the bank, the hum of a car engine in the distance. Every small noise seemed painfully loud. Then Kane snapped. He shoved his holster closed and let out a growl. You people don't understand. She fits the description. The crowd gasped. She's a child, a man shouted. She's 10 years old. But Kane's face was red with fury. He pointed a finger at Maya. She was where she shouldn't be. Don't act innocent. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Something about his words, about the way he spit them out with such venom, struck her deeply. She realized in that moment it was never about a description. It was about control. It was about prejudice. And Evelyn wasn't going to let that stand. Just hours earlier, the morning had been so different. After breakfast, Evelyn had walked Maya to the corner store. The day was bright, the air filled with the smell of fresh bread from the bakery across the street. They'd laughed together about silly things, Maya trying to balance a carton of eggs on her head, Evelyn chasing after her when she nearly tripped on the sidewalk. It was supposed to be a simple errand. Milk, bread, and a pack of crayons Maya begged for. They had walked hand in hand, their hearts light. Evelyn had no idea that the very street they were laughing on would become the scene of a fight for her daughter's dignity. Back on Main Street, Evelyn's strength grew as the crowd's voices rose. Let them be. Enough already. Stop this madness. She could feel the tide shifting. Kane might have the badge, but she had the people. With a shaky breath, she straightened her shoulders. You want to take her? She said loudly, so everyone could hear. Then take me too. Because I'm not letting go of my daughter. The street fell silent. Even Maya stared up at her mother in awe. Kane's face twisted. His pride was wounded, his authority challenged. He yanked at his radio, barking into it. Back up. Now. The words hit Evelyn like a cold slap. More officers were coming. More uniforms. More guns. And then, from the back of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. A man in a gray hoodie, his voice steady but strong. Enough is enough, officer. Let them go. Kane spun around, glaring. Stay out of this. But the man didn't move. His presence seemed to anchor the crowd, giving them courage. Others stepped forward too, forming a line between Evelyn, Maya, and the officer. Evelyn's heart raced. For the first time, she felt the weight of hope pressing against the fear. Maybe they weren't as alone as she thought. And then, in the distance, the wail of sirens pierced the air. The sound grew louder, closer, each second pounding in her chest like a drum. Backup was on the way. And Evelyn realized, this was just the beginning. The sirens grew louder until they were screaming in every direction. Tires screeched as police cars swerved into Main Street, lights flashing red and blue across the crowd. Doors slammed. Boots pounded on the pavement. Within seconds, 3 more officers rushed forward, hands on their holsters, their eyes darting from Evelyn to Kane to the gathering crowd. Maya clung tighter to her mother. Her little body trembled like a leaf caught in the wind. Evelyn could feel her daughter's heartbeat racing against her side. She bent her head down just enough to whisper, Stay with me, baby. Don't let go. The crowd, which had been chanting in protest, fell into a tense, uneasy hush. Every breath, every shuffle of a foot, felt dangerous, like a spark that could set off an explosion. Officer Kane was quick to take control. He jabbed his finger toward Evelyn and Maya, his voice booming. There. That's the suspect. The word suspect cut through the air like a knife. Evelyn's eyes widened. Suspect? My child. Are you kidding me? Someone in the crowd shouted. She's a little girl, yelled another. This is madness. But the new officers hesitated. They looked at Maya, at her tiny frame, her trembling hands clutching crayons in a small paper bag. Doubt flickered in their eyes. Kane noticed. His jaw clenched, and he barked. Don't let them fool you. She was casing the bank earlier today. Witnesses saw her. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. The lie was so bold, so cruel. She almost couldn't believe he had said it. Casing a bank. She's 10, she cried, her voice breaking. She's a child who wanted crayons. The crowd erupted again, this time angrier, louder. People held their phones higher, recording every second. The chants shifted into one powerful roar. Let them go! Let them go! Let them go! One of the younger officers stepped forward, his hand hovering uncertainly over his weapon. Sir, are you sure? She's just a kid. Kane's face burned crimson. He stepped closer to Evelyn and Maya, his shadow looming. Don't question me, he hissed through clenched teeth. Do your job. Evelyn felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to stand tall. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, waiting, watching. Fear clawed at her chest, but she pushed it down and spoke with every ounce of strength she had left. My daughter is not a suspect. My daughter is not a criminal. My daughter is a child. And if you can't see that, then maybe the whole world needs to see who you really are. The crowd roared its approval. Some chanted Evelyn's name. Others shouted for justice. The sound shook the street like thunder. For a moment, Kane's mask cracked. His confidence faltered, and something, maybe fear, maybe rage, flickered in his eyes. He gripped his radio again, his voice harsh. I said arrest them. The younger officer froze. His eyes darted to Maya, then back to the sea of people recording. His lips pressed into a tight line. He didn't move. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn's heart pounded. For one fragile moment, it seemed like the tide was turning. Like maybe, just maybe, the truth was winning. And then, Kane snapped. With a sudden burst of fury, he lunged forward, grabbing Maya by the arm and yanking her away from Evelyn. The crowd screamed. Phones shook in hands. Evelyn shrieked, reaching out desperately, her fingers brushing her daughter's sleeve. "No," she cried. Maya stumbled, terror in her eyes, as Kane's grip tightened. The crowd surged forward, chaos breaking loose. People shouted, pushed, and struggled to get closer. Sirens wailed louder as more police cars screeched to a stop, and Evelyn's world spun into a blur of fear and fury. Her daughter was in the hands of the very man she feared most. The world seemed to move in slow motion. Maya's scream pierced the air as Officer Kane dragged her back, his grip iron-tight on her arm. Evelyn's legs surged forward without thought, powered by a mother's terror, but two officers stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Let her go. Evelyn shrieked, her voice tearing from her throat. She pushed against the officers, but they held her back. The crowd exploded. Some shouted at the police, others surged forward, recording, yelling, demanding Kane's arrest. The sound was deafening, horns blaring, voices overlapping, the chaos of fear and rage. Maya twisted and pulled, crying, "Mama! Mama!" Her small hands clawed at Kane's sleeve, her crayons spilling from the paper bag and scattering across the pavement. Red, blue, yellow, little pieces of innocence trampled under rushing feet. Kane's face was twisted with fury, sweat beading on his forehead. "This girl's coming with me," he barked. "She's a threat." "A threat?" Evelyn's voice broke. "She's 10 years old." The younger officer from before, the one who had hesitated, stepped forward now. His voice trembled, but it was steady enough to be heard. "Sir, this is wrong. Let the child go." Kane's eyes snapped to him, wild and sharp. "Do you want to lose your badge?" But the crowd cheered the young officer's defiance. "Let her go. Let her go," they chanted, the sound rumbling like an earthquake through the street. For one heart-stopping second, Evelyn saw Maya's eyes, wide, wet, filled with terror. She felt something primal rise inside her, a power greater than fear. She shoved past the blocking officers with surprising strength, her body fueled by pure desperation. She lunged forward and grabbed her daughter's hand. Their fingers touched, small and trembling against her own, before Kane yanked Maya back again. Evelyn's fingernails scraped across her daughter's palm as their grip broke apart. "Mama!" Maya's scream echoed through Evelyn's bones. The crowd surged. Someone threw a bottle that shattered against the street near Kane's feet. Others pushed closer, some climbing on cars to get a better view. Phones shook in trembling hands, recording every moment. One officer shouted into his radio, "We need backup now. The crowd's out of control." But Evelyn wasn't thinking about the crowd, or the police, or the cameras. All she could see was her daughter being dragged further away. Her heart pounded like a war drum. Not my child. Not like this. Not today. Her legs moved before her mind caught up. She broke into a run, shoving past the chaos, weaving through reaching arms. She lunged again, this time slamming her shoulder into Kane with every ounce of strength in her body. The impact shocked everyone, even Evelyn herself. Kane stumbled, his grip loosening for a split second. Maya fell to the ground, her knees scraping against the pavement, but free. "Run, baby!" Evelyn screamed. "Run to the crowd!" Maya scrambled to her feet, her tiny legs sprinting toward the people reaching out for her. The crowd erupted in cheers as she dove into the arms of a woman at the front. But Kane's face twisted into something darker than fury. He whirled on Evelyn, his hand snapping to his holster. The glint of the gun caught the sunlight. The crowd gasped as one. "No!" Evelyn cried, raising her hands, but his weapon was already rising. Time froze. The chant of the crowd, the flashing lights, the trembling of her hands, everything blurred. And then, the younger officer moved. With a swift, desperate push, he shoved Kane's arm upward just as the trigger was pulled. The gunshot thundered through the street. The bullet tore into the sky. The crowd screamed. Evelyn dropped to her knees, clutching her head. Maya sobbed into the arms of the stranger, holding her. The young officer stared at Kane, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with something fierce. "You're done," he growled at Kane. Kane's face burned with rage, his gun still trembling in his hand. But the eyes of the world, the cameras, the crowd, the officers around him, were now locked on him. And Evelyn knew. Something had shifted. But what would happen next? No one could predict. Smoke from the gun still hung in the air, curling like a ghost above the street. The echo of the shot rang in everyone's ears, leaving a sharp silence in its wake. For a moment, it felt as though the whole world had stopped breathing. Kane's arm shook, the gun still in his hand. His face was red, veins bulging at his temple, rage boiling in his eyes. But he wasn't the only one trembling. All around him, people gasped. Mothers pulled their children close, and grown men who rarely flinched stood frozen in disbelief. Evelyn's chest rose and fell in rapid bursts. She could still feel the vibration of the gunshot deep in her bones. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against the asphalt to steady herself. But her eyes locked on one thing, Maya, safe in the arms of a stranger who held her protectively against their chest. "Put the gun down," someone shouted from the crowd. "Yeah, put it down," another voice followed. The chant grew, swelling into a wave of sound. "Put it down. Put it down." Kane's eyes darted around wildly. For the first time, Evelyn saw it, not just anger, but fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of exposure. Fear of the truth staring back at him through hundreds of camera lenses. The young officer who had pushed his arm up stood his ground, chest heaving, face pale but determined. His hand was still raised, ready to shove Kane back again if needed. "Sir," he said firmly, his voice carrying through the tense silence. "It's over. Lower your weapon." Kane growled through gritted teeth. "You don't tell me what to do." His eyes darted back to Evelyn, burning with hatred. "This woman, this girl, they're dangerous. You'll all see." Evelyn's voice cracked like lightning through the air. "Dangerous? She's a child. My child." She rose to her feet, her whole body shaking, her fists clenched at her sides. "The only danger here is you." The crowd roared in agreement. Phones lifted higher, people shouting, pushing forward. The pressure of hundreds of eyes closed in on Kane like a vice. And then, something happened that no one expected. An older man in the crowd stepped forward. He was tall, dressed in a plain gray jacket, with kind but tired eyes. His voice was calm but carried enough weight to silence the noise. "Officer," he said slowly, "look around you. Look at what you're doing. You're not protecting anyone. You're destroying everything." Kane's jaw clenched, his knuckles white around the gun. His eyes flickered, just for a second, to the people surrounding him, the mothers, the children, the young men holding back tears, the old man who spoke with quiet authority. Her mouth was dry, but something deep within her told her she couldn't stay silent. Not now. Not after all this. She lifted Maya onto her hip, her free hand trembling, but strong enough to grip the microphone that someone shoved toward her. Her voice cracked at first, but then it found strength, carried by the weight of every mother, every child, every silent cry that had been ignored before this night. My daughter and I came here today hoping to be heard. Instead, we were hunted. We saw hate, ugly, poisonous hate, but we also saw kindness that this man, her voice shook, this stranger, was willing to give, even at the cost of his life. He stood up for us when others turned away. If that isn't humanity, then what is? The crowd murmured, some crying, others nodding fiercely. The camera stayed fixed on her. She looked directly at Cain then, her voice like steel. You thought you could scare us. You thought your power would silence us. But tonight, the world saw who you really are. And tomorrow, the world will see what justice looks like. The officers dragged Cain to his feet. For the first time, he didn't fight. His shoulders slumped, his curses quiet. He looked around the crowd and realized he had lost. Not just his badge, not just his gun, but the respect, the fear, the control he had used like a weapon. It was gone. As the crowd began to disperse, Evelyn sat on the steps of a nearby building, rocking Maya back and forth. The night air was cool, carrying with it the faint sound of sirens, still racing through the city. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her spirit blazed like fire. Maya stirred against her chest, her little voice soft. Mama, are we safe now? Evelyn kissed the top of her head, closing her eyes as tears fell. We're safer than we were yesterday, baby. Because now the truth is out, and the truth is stronger than fear. The following days blurred into one storm of media headlines, court hearings, and protests swelling larger than ever before. Evelyn found herself at the center of it all, not by choice, but because fate had demanded it. The video footage, the testimonies, the haunting image of a bleeding man whispering for kindness. It all spread across the nation like wildfire. For once, people couldn't look away. They couldn't deny what had happened in broad daylight. The trial came quickly, pressure mounting from every corner. Cain sat in the defendant's chair, his eyes hollow. Witness after witness spoke, their voices weaving a tapestry of truth that cut through every lie he had lived behind. Evelyn stood too, her hands trembling but her words steady, telling the jury what her daughter had endured. And when the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, the room erupted in cheers, tears, and prayers of thanks. Evelyn closed her eyes, clutching Maya's hand so tightly it hurt, whispering to her, "We did it, baby. We did it." But as the noise faded, she thought again of the man who had stood for her that night, who had given his last breath for kindness. His face stayed in her mind, his words etched into her soul. She carried them with her always. Don't let hate be the last word. Years later, when Maya was older, Evelyn would tell her daughter the story again and again, not of Cain, not of the violence, but of the stranger who had stood with them when they were most alone. And Maya would always listen with wide eyes, then nod softly and say, "Mama, that's why we keep going, right? So kindness wins." Evelyn would smile through her tears, hug her daughter tight, and answer, "Yes, baby, that's exactly why." Because the world had seen a shocking act in broad daylight, but it had also seen something else, something stronger. A mother's courage, a stranger's sacrifice, a community's demand for justice. And together, those things would echo far louder than any single shot ever could. The end.